I'm very pleased to be joined by Emma Beeston, who's written a brilliant, or co-edited, I should say, with Beth Breeze, a brilliant book, which if you haven't seen it, please do get a copy, called Advising Philanthropists. So Emma, thank you very much for joining us. I know the book was launched a few months ago and has been really well received. And you, as I, have been involved in many years in the philanthropy advisory business, but this is wonderful to have a book that sets it all out. But first of all, perhaps, Emma, you could just share with us what, for those that are new, what is philanthropy advisory? What is this all about?
Thanks, Ben. I guess put simply, the Philanthropy Advisor guides and supports philanthropists with their giving. It's kind of that straightforward, but there's more to it than that, obviously. So they're acting both as an expert, so they're bringing knowledge and insight into the nonprofit sector and how to achieve impact. And then they're also there as facilitators of the process, so guiding philanthropists from kind of identifying their values and their motivations right through to kind of turning their giving into action and helping them navigate all the many choices along the way that philanthropy kind of presents.
I mean, it's very interesting reading the book. You know, the first classic quote is a good old Carnegie saying, "It's harder to give it away than it is to actually make it." And since Carnegie was quite a few years ago, last time I checked, it's amazing that this is the first time we've actually got a book that documents this. I think it's the only book of its kind, possibly in the world, certainly outside the US, that actually tackles the big subject. And it makes me wonder, given the billions that are around the world that are given, why is that? Why has it taken so long for you to put this together and others to put this together?
It's a really good question. I mean, when I started out as a philanthropy advisor, I didn't realize that there was so little attention on the profession. And then when at the University of Kent, I kind of co-created a module there on advising donors on their master's program. And again, when we were putting that course together, there was so little data and research to pull on. So there's loads of books about philanthropy, its role, and there's lots written about what philanthropists should be doing or shouldn't be doing, but very little about advisors themselves. So I think it's because we're a behind the scenes role. So it's like knowing the name of the director of a film or who the lead actor is, but you haven't got the faintest idea who the producer is or maybe even what a producer does. And I think we're like that. So we've heard of Mackenzie Scott and her giving, but not who was advising her. And it doesn't take much thought to realize she won't be doing that on her own. She will be asking people for advice, but for whatever reason, we're just behind the scenes and we're not getting that attention. We just haven't.
I think I mean, Mackenzie Scott's very interesting. She came up in a previous interview with Landessa as part of our Global 20 series. So we were talking about that gift. So clearly there is advice out there, but why, despite all that's going on in the world, has it taken so long for us to work out how to actually do this, or have a one book that tells people how to do this? I mean, it seems very strange in a way, given the billions that are given around. I mean, have you got any more thoughts, having put this together? Why people? Is it because people are willing to share, or is it because it's a profession that's in an early stage of development? Why do you think it's taken this long to get this group of essays and collections of expertise together?
Yeah, and the book is very much that. It is about an introduction to this profession because it's so little known, and that's what we set out to do, to kind of say who are these people and what are they doing and how do they do it, and what are the issues. And we know that philanthropy advisors have been around for hundreds of years, but you're right, we've got some courses, we've got some networks, but nothing like the kind of standards or codes of practice or training that, or the standing even, that other professions have. And I wonder if advisors have been caught up in that myth that charity and giving is this fluffy, easy thing. So that sense of it's not a serious part-time that takes real skills. So there's not a recognition that advice will be needed. And I guess just as some people don't want to pay for charity overheads, some of those misconceptions, they also don't want to pay for advice. It's seen as, I don't know, this yeah, fluffy is the word I use. It's not seen as something that's a proper profession in some way. But I know, like, recently both Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk have been quoted as saying that philanthropy is really hard. And you just think, well, if it's hard for them and they need, they'll need advice, then surely everybody does. But for some reason, I guess because it's partly about the heart, this idea
Sure.
that you therefore get official, experienced people to help you somehow just doesn't seem to fit with some people's expectations.
And it is strange given the amount of advisors ultra high net worths have on so many different subjects that in the context, the amount given and the context, the fact that this book has only just arrived, it seems that, this whole profession is developing relatively late compared to other advisory professions. And yet, as we well know, giving the money away is not easy. And without the right advice, it's very, very difficult. It's easy to get wrong. So it's quite bizarre. Maybe that's unpacking that is part of our job in the future. But anyway, it's a fantastic book. Really great models from around the world. One of the things that I wanted to explore a little further is that we always think that the US, well, quite rightly, it's the most mature philanthropic market, is always ahead. What I thought was nice about your book is it drew from around the world. What was your observation about the US, and is it so far ahead, or is it actually lots of the learnings that we can get from the US we can also get from other parts of the world? How do you see the US in the context of global philanthropy advice?
Um, I mean, you're in the book. We did have the really nice privilege of interviewing philanthropy advisors from, I think, it's 15 different countries. The reality is still that America is dominating a lot of the kind of report and the research and the thinking. And so that kind of more US centric thinking kind of still dominates a lot of the literature. And I think still dominates people's sense of kind of what a philanthropist looks like and how they operate. Although obviously in America there's still, diverse approaches as well. But there's this kind of dominant one right way that can put people off because they go, well, I'm not a billionaire tech, philanthropist, so it's not about me. Um, but I think it if this is a big if because it was the first book I ever wrote and it's a challenge, but if we wrote it in kind of 10 years' time, I'd like to think that that will have changed and that we'll be hearing from more different cultures and different countries about their style of giving and their approach to giving and therefore what that advice needs to be. And for me, I think there'll be a shift to more collective and collaborative practices. I hope that advising will be involved in that space a bit more. Um, we don't know how it's going to evolve, but if you think about the need, we're facing such huge challenges, to do with social justice and climate change, as well as how do we pay for the things that matter, like, I don't know, hospices or things that bring us joy, like art and music. And philanthropy can't fix all of those, but there are more wealthy people can step up and can give more. So there's a huge opportunity here. So outside, still in America, but across the world, to have people that are benefiting and are wealthy to think about what they do, with their money and how they can use that to do good in the world. And I think philanthropy advisors are part of unlocking those resources because they can help people move from that fear of getting it wrong or that complete sense of overwhelm and where do I start, so they can really kind of get in there and unlock some of that giving and also advise on kind of good practice and how best to support change. So I think that will look different in different countries and I'm looking forward to seeing how it evolves. But I definitely think we'll see more of it and it will be growing as a profession, hopefully more diverse, hopefully more specialisms in there. And one thing that was interesting from doing the interviews with the 40 advisors, yourself included, thank you very
Thank
much,
you very much.
which was great to have you in there, but everybody that we spoke with said that there was a need for more philanthropy advisors. And
Yeah.
that's quite unusual if you think of a profession kind of effectively welcoming competition. So, that was striking because everybody can see that there's a huge need for more people to come into the space to encourage and advise philanthropists to give as much as they can.
I think, what's fascinating is, though, obviously the US reference is very important, and the US content is very important. And a lot of the principles and guiding principles and your conceptual diagrams and all the great stuff in there that you can actually deploy are very appropriate to deploy around the world. I think what's interesting is, the cultural differences you talk about, and certainly our work in Asia, you see it emerging, but it's still at very early stages. The idea of actually paying for good advice around philanthropy is very early, but it could really take off. And I'm also mindful, even in the UK, it's been relatively slow. I was sat next to a high net worth individual, and they were saying, well, I think I ought to do something in the environment. And one of our kids has got sick, so we think we should do something in the medical healthcare, but we're really not sure. And that individual was paying through a donor advised fund as a means to kind of buffer that whole decision-making process. So, even now, it's pretty evident that people really struggle with how to put their arms around this and actually invest in good advice. So I think this is a really incredible step in the right direction. So you're thinking that this will grow around the world then? Are you bullish, and how big do you think it could grow? I mean, where is it now? I think you had a very nice reception when you launched the book, and I think there were about 50 or 60 sort of philanthropy advisors, and it was very kindly that you asked me as well. I mean, probably that's the core, but I mean, how big could it get? How big could this profession get? Is it something that should look to in terms of career development? How big is this going to develop, do you think?
I am bullish because, as you say, it's hard. It's hard to work out, and that is the thing that's shared around the world. How do you work out where you're going to focus your attention and your efforts, given everything you could possibly do? And then how do you not do that in a silo on your own? How do you make that meaningful by joining and connecting with others? That's not an easy, problem to have. It's important and it matters, but it's not easy. So yes, the book was well received, which has been lovely. We still have work to do on raising awareness, which was, one of the jobs that we hoped the book will do. So just as you've sort of talked about someone you spoke to recently, I've recently had a conversation with, an advisor to wealthy individuals, not a philanthropy advisor, who was basically going, well, what do you do that I can't do? And not really recognizing the difference that a philanthropy advisor brings to a wealth manager. Whereas, I think they're very different, and I'd like us all to be working together alongside clients rather than feeling that, I don't know, that philanthropy advice is just a small thing that can be added. So I think there's that low awareness, I think, is a barrier to my bullish vision of growth, because it doesn't mean there are any clear routes into the profession. I mean, people are interested and are moving in, and it's great that we have people that have come from, international development or fundraising or, different routes into the profession, and they're self-motivated because there hasn't been a clear career progression, and that's great. But I think we should be doing more to support people into the profession through more training and developing shared standards of what quality advice looks like. And I think that would help donors and philanthropists too, who kind of to see what's possible and what their options are in terms of advice. And we also need to help work with those who are working with wealthy people so that they understand the value of philanthropy advice, and so they can refer their clients with confidence to philanthropy advisors. And I think, clients want to talk about things like impact and legacy and purpose and making a difference. And it's about supporting them to do that with, I guess, a more collective mindset where all the different professions bring different aspects that are needed, but philanthropy advice is definitely part of that.
And what other big barriers are there to entry in this space?
I think those are the main ones. I think this lack of awareness, which kind of underpins a lot of it. And then, there are some courses, but not much at the moment. So I think you would feel like you were taking a risk if you were kind of saying, I want to be a philanthropy advisor. I'm not sure anyone at school is standing up going, I want
it's not on the national curriculum quite just yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
And that's going to take a while. We don't have there's not particular role models because it's that behind the scenes profession. So I think the main one definitely is that lack of awareness and that need for, I would say, professionalization without turning it into an elite, with barriers to entry, but definitely, helping people to do the role, both the sort of technical aspects, but also, as you know, a lot of it is about emotion because you're working with people, and their money and how they feel about money and their wealth and their children, and they may have come into money through loss or other difficult circumstances. So there can be quite a lot of emotional aspect. It's not just a straightforward transaction that we're talking about. It's about a journey and learning and evolving. And then there's also the ethics of it as well. And I think that's the other aspect around that it would be good to teach that aspect as well and get people to reflect on some of the tricky challenges that the role brings, as you know.
Absolutely. Well, it's been an absolute delight, Emma, to talk to you about this. And as I say, congratulations on giving brilliant tools in the book, but also giving so much to the profession by documenting it and bringing this all together. Are you bullish about, the whole philanthropic sector and how it might develop and the role of philanthropy advice, or are you a little bit more doom and gloom given the recent stats? You think this is going to really take off, or is it going to just chunter on? Because it has chuntered on a bit.
I'm optimistic. I think the younger generation give me a lot of cause for optimism about their sense of how they want to, create impact through the whole of their lives. And, those that are therefore coming into family foundations and family wealth are doing things differently. I think I have a lot of optimism about that. I think also part of the book, chapter 7, we look at some of the criticisms of philanthropy advice. So, I'll characterize it very crudely, but we're a privileged elite serving wealthy tax dodgers to feel better about themselves. That would be kind of, a very flippant way of putting it. But actually, I think people are reflecting on our role and what the boundaries are and how much it's about serving, how much it's about informing and educating and challenging. And there's some people doing some really interesting work around disrupting the status quo. So it's kind of moving beyond kind of what do you want to do with your spare money to thinking much more about what does the world need you to be. And I think some of those shifts are really interesting. I don't know how they'll go, but I definitely think I would invite people to enter the profession now because I think it's really interesting and I think it's really important. And it's a growth area that needs professionalizing. But if we get it right, the prize is huge that we can help unlock some money that isn't being spent, at the moment because people aren't giving for all sorts of reasons, and increase the funds that are available through philanthropy through our roles.
Very positive note to end on, Emma. So thank you very much. Direct Your Social Change is where you go online. I'm sure you can find it. The book, please do, for those that haven't read it yet, please do get a copy. It's a really great read as well as a very instructive and informative, giving all those tools. So well done for you and for Beth for putting it together, and for everyone that's contributed. It's also wonderful to see everyone working together as a profession, all the philanthropy advisors, ourselves, you, all the others coming together and actually contributing best practice and our thoughts on it. So thank you very much for participating in the Global 20 interview and really shine a torch on what an interesting subject area, and congratulations again on the book. So thank you very much, Emma, and I'm sure we'll hear more in the future.
Thanks, Ben.